To be brutally honest with you guys, I really liked Octopath Traveler 0, but I also feel like my colleagues in RPG YouTube have been a little too uncritical of this entry, singing its praises without caveat, declaring it to be easily the best Octopath game out there, and the unwavering future of the Octopath series. Bold claims, in my opinion, so if I'm going to offer anything different here, I will instead be offering critical praise of this game, because I did like it, but I will structure this review into 3 sections. What I liked, what I didn't like, and what I loved about Octopath Traveler 0. I know this game has a really big fan base, so I implore you to watch to the end, because, again, I ended up really liking this game in the main, but it was a journey for me to land on that opinion. Long intros are boring though, so let's just dive right into what I liked about Octopath Traveler 0. And I'll start with the visuals. Octopath is the progenitor franchise of gorgeous HD 2D art style, and while I think it's true that this game's visuals don't quite reach the peak of Octopath 2's, the style is still gorgeous eye candy and something I have all the time in the world for. But who am I to ramble on about the visuals? This is something very easy for you to suss out for yourself through trailers, or the free demo, or just my B-roll on this video to determine if this is a style that works for you. It always works for me. I also liked character creation. It has its opaque elements like mystery items you can choose, but like I said in my demo review, linked here if you're curious, Octopath always had a pseudo-sandbox spirit to it, so I feel the general vibe of the game lends well to a quote, create your own avatar approach, and though I have some nitpicks and caveats I'll share later, I still thought this was a good overall choice 90 hours later. I also enjoyed the town building. It was one of the bigger advents of this entry by way of the Octopath series, and while I generally don't like to be bothered with these sort of chores in single-player story-rich games, it was snappy and lean enough here to not be too much trouble, and the game did a good job getting me invested in the town, and Stia, chiefly, in her efforts to rebuild it. The gameplay perks very much incentivized this as well, with some examples including a power that lets you open up the rare blue chests that are locked throughout the game, or the ability to teleport anywhere on the map, not just towns. My final like, and again we'll discuss loves later, was the voice acting. On balance, I thought it was pretty good. Stia was an absolute charmer, and Sazantos showed some great range as well. There are some duds like Saoirse, whose audio was terribly mixed and way too low, or like Labrant, who literally just sounded like an AI voiceover.
No one alive can claim to have never made one.
But
If it would put your mind at ease, I shall enlist the help of another.
Yeah. But in the main, I thought the voice acting was pretty solid for my likes. Hey, by the way, this is Nick B RPG. I talk about all things RPG, and I'm a new, growing channel. If you're enjoying this video so far, consider giving me a like and a sub. Your support helps me out a lot. Now, I know this game was very well received, so this is the section where I get myself into trouble, because I do have a fairly large laundry list of things about this game that I didn't like. And I found it surprising that so few reviewers had so few critical words to say of this game at all. I'd beg for your mercy and grace, but I know that the internet doesn't work that way, so if you hate this, tar and feather me, I guess. My first gripe is with the blue chests. Basically, all over the world, in towns and dungeons, there are blue chests. These are chests that are sealed by a mysterious force that you are not able to open until I'd say the midpoint of the game, when you unlock the ability through upgrading your town's church to do so. So if you're a little bit of a completionist, like me, who has to know what's in all of those chests that you've been missing along the way for like the past 30 hours of gameplay, prepare yourself for a lot of backtracking. This just felt player hostile to me. This is already an overlong game in my opinion, we'll touch on that in a minute. To bake this kind of backtracking into it, not my cup of tea at all. Especially given my second gripe, which is random encounters and the random encounter rate. Before you get evasive maneuvers, I should say. It's actually pretty reasonable after. Look, I've been playing JRPGs since the 80s. I'm no spring chicken when it comes to random encounters. A lot of my favorite games of all time have them, but even despite that, I still find random encounters to largely be a vestige of a bygone era, with on-screen, avoidable encounters as the strictly superior format. I'll always maintain that position, even though I suspect Octopath will always be a random encounter format. To be clear, this is a nitpick. It's not the end of the world for me, and I absolutely love this series despite this design choice. This will probably be a pretty spicy take, but I did not love the size of the playable cast in this game. To me, 36 characters just feels unwieldy to try to gear up and nigh impossible to full or properly integrate into this game's story, which it certainly does not accomplish. To me, this appears to be a holdover from the game's mobile roots, keeping every character, including the ones who were clearly just meant to be filler gacha pulls. Yes, I've played games with big casts. Yes, I'm a huge Suikoden fan, but no, this just didn't quite land for me here. I would have much preferred a more focused and intimate cast, like the first two Octopaths, frankly, which we'll talk about more later because the game does kind of get there in the end. So I will call back to this in my love section of this video. While I loved this game's floating skill and passive system, we'll talk more about that later, I did not love that breaking the damage cap was still confined to a single passive on a single character. Being an Octopath OG, I knew to be on the lookout for this as soon as I got Ulbrich, but this still annoyed me. You're going to want to be able to break the damage cap on most of your party. What this meant in effect is that while you technically have two floating passive slots, one of them being nearly necessarily confined to this is just bad game design. It's an anti-choice, in my opinion. I don't generally play games like this for a Herculean challenge, so call this next one a nitpick if you want, but this game, at least for me, was incredibly easy. The 8-man parties, which I fundamentally love, more on that later, really do make your party feel unfairly stacked and like you can overwhelm your foes through just sheer numbers, and always have healthy or charged characters in reserve. Again, I love this system fundamentally, I just felt like the tuning was off and it trivialized the game. Then there's the silent protagonist. In my demo review, I was actually completely okay with this. Again, I'm a gamer of yesteryear and silent protags were the norm. But to be honest with you, as the hours counted onward, and especially as the number of one-on-one important scenes with your protagonist stacked up, this became an increasingly bigger annoyance to me. It was better early on when characters like Stia and Fen could voice the quote-unquote heart of the party, but later on, especially given the disjointed nature of this game's scenarios, a voiceless protagonist being the glue holding everything together and connecting the scenarios just fell flat to me. Even with a player avatar, giving that character voiced lines would have gone a long way to help sell the scenes. Think like Mediator Refantasio, for example. I mentioned this before, but I'll just say it again quickly in passing. The audio mixing seems spotty at times. This is not usually a problem, to be fair, but some characters like Saoirse come to mind, where QC was definitely needed on the audio levels. A nitpick, not a huge problem in the main. My next two gripes are about tone. First, let's talk about the villains. For the first, 50 hours of gameplay, you're basically hunting a slew of villains who are superficially different characters, but are practically the worst evil who ever eviled. Really hateable evil villains can definitely work. I see the appeal of Luca Blight or Kefka, right? But I don't think Suikoden 2 or the Final Fantasy series would work if every single villain was a Luca Blight or a Kefka. And for many hours through this game, that's how I felt about the villains, just irredeemably and unnuanced evil. And by proxy of this, the game's main story tone felt similarly one note, just destitute. And here's the thing, I can handle dark, I can handle blood and guts, I can handle emotional damage. Xenogears, Baldur's Gate 3, and Amori are all some of my favorite games of all time, and they do exactly that. The problem with Octopath Zero's first few dozen hours is that there's just virtually no relief from this tone. That's when the writing can either start to feel repetitive or just exhausting. I was able to stomach well enough hunting the first 3 big bads, especially given how good of a job the prologue did in making you want to hunt them. But then spending the next 20 to 30 hours hunting Turbo Evil Santa Claus, the jig was getting old at that point. Every villain just felt so samey to me. Combine this with the fact that for much of the game, the stories are completely disjointed. This is a common theme in the Octopath series, to be fair, and you feel like you're playing an anthology of loosely related stories duct taped together for the first 75 to 80% of this very long game. The side quests, while being lean individually in the main, don't help, as more often than not, the story content is not terribly compelling. At the 50 to 60 hour mark, I was actually feeling pretty fatigued and burnt out by this game. It just felt too long and frankly too padded for my likes. If you're new to this channel, know that I really like shorter, tighter experiences in my gaming. But I did pull through and I ended up really liking this game because there really is a lot to love about this game, and the final hours of this game did everything just a lot better than the previous hours before, in my opinion. So let's move to the final section of this video and tell you everything I loved about Octopath Traveler 0. First is the music. Octopath music just doesn't miss, man. The last time I played Octopath music on my channel, I got a copyright warning, so forgive me for not sharing it as this video is background music. But if you're a fan of the series, you already know. And if you're not, just trust me, bro. Octopath's music doesn't miss. It was a straight treat all the way through the game. And just like the music, Octopath's combat never misses for me either. The loop of setting up a party, building up type coverage, and rounding out that party, and then breaking enemy shields to follow up with devastating damage is just a really addicting party building and combat loop. And while I complained about this game being very long, this game's addicting combat held up for me all the way through my 90-hour playthrough. Here's an oddball thing I love about this game that you might not have heard any other reviewer touch on, and that is the fact that I love that in the main, Octopath Zero's dungeons are really small. Some people like mega dungeons in games. I do not. And especially for a huge game like this, I think the genius of its mostly small dungeons is that it helps break up the pacing and aid to the general flow of the game. You feel like you're able to accomplish something in every sitting with this game because its dungeons and quests in the main are very bite-sized. And to me, that really does help making taking on a behemoth of a game like this more palatable. I loved the floating skill system, including the ability to master and port most character skills to others, and some passives to boot. The genius of this system is that characters' base kits always matter because your floating slots are firstly very limited, because the base slots are fixed, and many skills, usually the best of them might I add, are not portable. Combine this with unique ultimates, and I think the game did a fantastic job in striking a balance between character integrity and identity, and player choice and customization. Despite me believing this game's balance is off in favor of the player, I do fundamentally love the 8-person party. If you're going to have a huge cast, then yeah, at least let me use a good amount of them. This gave you, the player, tons of options in combat and even more in team building, which, yes, though I found the cast to be too big, that's mostly for narrative reasons. The team building aspect in the main is quite fun for a game like this, and I would love to see this system return with better balance tuning in the future mainline Octopath games. If the game had a core cast of 8 characters like Octopath 1 and 2, and I was allowed to take all 8 of them into every battle, that would be perfection in my eyes. So to me, I really love this system, and I do see future potential for this system if they choose to carry it throughout the series. And frankly, I hope they do. Last and certainly not least, I complained earlier in this video about one-note and monotone villains and story beats. I complained about disjointedness. I complained about padding and fluff and spotty storytelling. So what if I told you that the final arc of this game drastically improves all of that? Yeah, I'll be honest, I was 60-ish hours in and I was getting really burnt out by this game. But I have to say, I caught a major second wind when almost all of the main characters of the game's story came together started interacting with each other, all while the villains became much more complex and interesting at the exact same time. I loved this game's final chapters, and it did feel like a worthy payoff for having made it this far. Some of the final dungeons and scenarios were amazing in their presentation, and overall, I really liked how this game flowed at the end. The final hours of this game were absolutely my favorite and did help me end this one on a high note, I have to say. Overall, I really did enjoy Octopath Zero. Yes, I have no qualms admitting that I would have liked this game a lot more if it was probably, I don't know, half as long as it was. Hot take, I don't care, I'll die on that hill. And I understand that that is a divisive preference. Some people like long, meaty games as long as the game is overall good, and this game qualifies there, no problem. But I prefer much shorter, tighter experiences. I'll take 40 outstanding hours over 80 good hours any day of the week, personally. But you can take that information and do with that what you will. Even if I do think the game is a little bit bloated, it is absolutely a worthy entry in one of my very favorite modern JRPG series, that being Octopath. And this game does bring a lot of things to the table, including the 8-person party system that I personally hope makes its way into the mainline series. This was a long, fun romp, and I'm so glad I saw it through. Thanks so much for listening in. This is Nick B RPG. Here I talk about all things RPG, with JRPGs and turn-based RPGs being my absolute favorite. I love Octopath. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one.